Are you anti-Semitic?
Of course not. The real problem here is that I'm an anti-Zionist. The real problem here is that I'm extremely critical of Israel.
Look, I don't necessarily think that Hasan is an anti-Semite, but you can't blame people for thinking that when you play literally Hezbollah music videos on your stream. Pals, I think you're really going to enjoy this video. If you do, please hit the like and subscribe button and comment button. It really helps out.
This is Hasan Piker.
This is my dog Kaya. I thought you legitimately were going to work out.
I could do some weights. He's a social media superstar with almost 3 million followers on the video streaming platform Twitch.
They're eating the pets.
So this is that whole masculinity thing people are talking about, huh? And he's part of a growing group of streamers and podcasters reaching young men online, a space Trump tapped into to reach young male voters.
Punch in, then you won't be able to see that he's not doing any weights.
But Hasan is not a Trump supporter. He's a progressive, a fan of Bernie and AOC. The Democratic Party even invited him to the DNC in August. One thing we've been hearing for weeks now is that the left needs a Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I don't think that the Democratic Party can podcast itself out of this issue. Joe Rogan, he endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2020. Maybe they should do an autopsy on why he left the party.
We know why he left the party. We know why he left the party. It's not a big mystery. We know why he left the party. It wasn't because of the party. It was because of COVID and the Trump era. That's what happened. First of all, I don't even think Biden was a very strongly ideological figure. I think Biden displayed a proclivity for kind of anti-establishmentism. And he's done that for years. That's why he likes people like Tulsi. That's why he likes people like Bernie. That's why he likes people like whomever. It's not because he's been this like strongly partisan Democratic Party supporter for his whole life. COVID happened, and that piggybacked off of 4 years of him kind of like dipping his toes into the right-wing media ecosystem by inviting people like Stefan Molyneux, Gavin McInnes, Dave Rubin, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, Steven Crowder, and the list goes on and on and on and on. It's true that Joe Rogan has had, you know, the occasional lefty here and there, but for the most part, his audience is right-wing. I'm sorry, his guests have been more right-wing adjacent than not. So I don't know what the exact number is. I know that some people have done studies on the ideological leanings of his guests, and it's something like 90-10, like 90% right-wing or right-wing adjacent, libertarian adjacent. And then it's like 10% of the time, you might have some progressive people on there. But the progressive people that he invites on are typically like anti-Democratic Party. But COVID came around. He became ideologically entrenched around sort of anti-academia, anti-science. He went down a anti-vax rabbit hole, became convinced that the vaccines were dangerous for young men to take, became convinced that the lockdowns were a measure meant to exercise an authoritarian level of control over people's lives, and on and on and on and on. I would like Hasan, I mean, Hasan knows this. He's well aware of why Rogan drifted to the right in the last 8 years. It's not because we didn't get Medicare for all over the finish line. It's not because we haven't got paid family leave, pass a bill to do paid. It's not because of these things. Rogan drifted to the right because he went down a very similar rabbit hole that a lot of young men in this country and in the world, for that matter, went down, especially during COVID. They saw mitigation measures like, 6 foot distancing and not having more than 5 people in your home at the same time, and restricted travel in the beginning and closing schools. People like Joe Rogan see these things through a conspiratorial lens. So they think that the government was just doing it just to control people, just because they wanted to control people. And he thinks that they pushed the vaccine so hard because Big Pharma was going to make a lot of money off the vaccine. Not because the vaccine helped save lives, prevent hospitalizations, prevent extreme sickness. It was because, science is a bunch of fascists or whatever. That's why we quote unquote lost Rogan. There's nothing, literally nothing the Democratic Party could have done within reason that could have kept Joe Rogan from drifting right. And Hasan knows this. He's well aware of this.
I like to work out. I'm very bro-y. A lot of people look at the optics of that and they don't like it. They think like, oh, well, he's a little toxic, isn't he? And they don't really listen to what I have to say because I'm significantly more progressive than the average Democratic campaign.
Yeah, I've heard you say when it comes to
What does that have to do with being toxic? You can be super progressive and toxic.
stuff that guys like. You know, you seek that stuff out online, whether it's watching a streamer, whether it's watching guys talking about.
I know there's been a bit of discourse online about being fit and working out being quote unquote right-wing coded, but I don't know how true that is. I'm fairly certain that when we looked it up the other week, the states that struggle with obesity most are like deep red states. So when you rank each state by obesity, the red states are just dominating. So yeah, I'm aware of the discourse. I just don't know how true it is. I know a lot of super progressive left-leaning people that have worked out their entire lives. So I don't know.
Working out and fitness, you say that the right wing just dominates that space.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I think.
Oh, in terms of content, probably. Like, I would assume most fitness content creators and influencers probably skew to the right, I would assume.
I think that's why I started on Twitch, right? I know for a fact that the video game space is like people who consume this culture, people who are a part of this culture are not all right wing. I wanted to showcase to people that like, no, you can be a progressive person, you can be a leftist and like have fun at the same time.
How many people were watching your live stream on election night?
The total unique number was 7.5 million.
There's a general sense that when it comes to the world of podcasts, alternative media, I don't even know what you want to call it, that Trump did a much better job at that than Democrats and Harris.
There's no doubt about
Absolutely. I think that's true.
that.
I was a naysayer early. When I saw the Aiden Ross collab, I thought this doesn't have motion.
So this is
Same.
Trump with Aiden
When
Ross.
Trump went on Aiden Ross's stream, I was like, it was awkward, it was weird. But then I saw Trump on Theo Vaughn, and he started talking about cocaine, and I was like, uh-oh, this humanizes him.
Cocaine a stronger
Oh yeah.
up?
Yeah. Cocaine.
So,
will make
you're way up with cocaine more than anything else you can think of.
Cocaine will turn you into a damn owl, homie. You know what I'm saying? It'll.
Harris did consider going on Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
but she didn't.
So that was a mistake as well, I think, because Joe Rogan can't deliver adversarial.
Look, I mean, I tend to lean towards the fact that not going on Rogan was a mistake. Was it decisive? Probably not. But these are kind of death by a thousand cuts. So the fact that she ignored alternative media largely, just in general, she ignored it, or for the most part ignored it, I think was a big mistake. I also, I mean, hindsight is always 20/20. I also recognize that her going into Rogan's podcast was a risk, because Rogan would have been able to spout off like 40 insane conspiracy theories that he had seen on his social media feed that he's discussed many times on his podcast with his guests that he does. And in order to go into a format like that, you need to be so sharp. You need to be able to play whack-a-mole with these conspiracy theories. And that's actually really difficult. You have to be so in tune with all of the insane discourse that happens in right-wing spaces. You have to be up to date on the newest conspiracy theory and this kind of thing. And if Rogan would have bombarded her with significant level of crazy bullshit, that could have gone real south for her. So I understand the reticence, but I think that just speaks to the fact that whoever is the nominee in 2028 absolutely needs to be somebody who is super comfortable going into a setting where it's unscripted, talking for 2 or 3 hours. That's just what it is. Rogan literally adapts to the person he has on. She probably could have showed her how easy he is to sway, but she didn't even try. He says that, but I just don't believe him. Like when Rogan said, yeah, I want to have Kamala on and just get to know her as a human being and blah, 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 blah. I just don't buy that. I really don't. I think he would have been adversarial with her. I think he was very, very openly in the tank for Trump for like the last 2 or 3 years. And I think he would have hit her with all kinds of, I mean, you saw what he did with Trump. Like the hardest he went on Trump was asking Trump about the voter fraud stuff. And then he started to ask Trump, like, hey, are you going to show people your evidence? And then he let Trump just dog walk him. And then Trump just filibustered for 10 minutes straight. And then they moved on from that. That was the only time that Rogan even came close to pushing Trump on something that's super dubious, questionable. I think he would have asked her about Biden over and over again. That would have been his focus. Then marijuana prosecution. I think you're right about that. Yeah. I think it would have been like, why didn't you tell anybody that Biden was demented? Why didn't you tell anyone that Biden was at death's door? Like, I think it would have been like that. And Kamala was very polished in front of a podium, reading off of a teleprompter, which is a skill, but she just wasn't polished in the way that you need to be to go on Rogan. She wasn't, I don't think she was sharp enough, which isn't to say that I think she's stupid. This idea that Kamala Harris is an idiot is insane to me, but she's certainly more comfortable in a setting like Oprah or, you know, Call Her Daddy or whatever.
Interviews if his life depended on it.
What is it that the Democrat Party has to do differently?
Why do people call it the Democrat Party? Stop it. It's the Democratic Party. It's the Democratic Party. Even lefties are calling it the Democrat Party. I've heard Destiny call it the Democrat Party. It's the Democratic Party. It's the name of when they say the Democrat Party, it's a pejorative to them.
Well, I think that they need to change their policies.
It's a policy thing.
Yes, it's 100% a policy thing.
Because I'll say,
which is the boring answer. Although it would be very self-serving for me to say, I'm the left's Joe Rogan, the Democratic Party should give me millions of dollars. That's not going to solve this problem. What will solve this problem is if the Democratic Party...
If you got to do socialism, just do socialism. If you do socialism, Rogan would have been on board. You court the Joe Rogans of the world by doing socialism.
He actually adopts real left-wing economic populist messaging instead of purposefully avoiding that stuff because they're terrified of upsetting their corporate donors. I think Trump speaks to male insecurities better, and I think Trump speaks to the anger that people have, whereas the other side of the political spectrum does not speak to that anger at all.
There's been a lot of controversy around you.
Yes.
The way you talk about Israel is viewed by some as anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Are you anti-Semitic?
Of course not. The real problem here is that I'm an anti-Zionist. The real problem here is that I'm extremely critical of Israel and all of the information that's readily available, especially on social media for so many.
Look, I don't necessarily think that Hasan is an anti-Semite, but you can't blame people for thinking that when you play literally Hezbollah music videos on your stream. And you say stuff like, yeah, I'm cool with Hezbollah. When it says like Hezbollah's is it Hezbollah or the Houthis? Where it's death to America, death to Israel, you know, curse be upon the Jews or whatever.
People that don't necessarily rely on mainstream media any longer to get their information. And that's why you see this generational gap. If you're over the age of 35, you're still operating on the old boundaries. You're like, no, Israel's the most moral democracy in the Middle East, maybe in the world, right? Like, and I think that the major generational divide that is, I think, in a very damaging way, feeding into the mistrust overall that people have with mainstream news in general.
Brian Tyler Cohen, I think, summed it up best when we spoke to him when he was on the pod. He said that right-wing content creators sort of accumulate all of their social capital by constantly the Democratic Party. And progressive content creators also accumulate all of their social capital by on the Democratic Party. Can you think of a single progressive big content creator or personality that doesn't find a way to shit on the Democratic Party basically every time they open their mouth? And this is just something that the Republican Party, they don't have to contend with on the same on the same level. There's infighting in the Republican Party for sure. Well, besides me. I mean, I would call myself a progressive, yeah, but besides me. Lonerbox described it this way. This segment of the left isn't anti-Semitic. Rather, their opposition to a Western-led world accidentally leads them to putting Israel in their crosshairs and supporting groups that happen to be anti-Semitic. I think that is a really good way to sum up this situation. I think that's no notes. That's a perfect way of setting up this scenario. They first and foremost take the position of West bad and more specifically America bad. And they inevitably find themselves sort of aligning with groups like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and in some extreme cases Hamas, because it is an offshoot of their core central belief that Western powers are bad. And so you have to support groups that oppose those Western forces. Even if you find their moral and cultural norms and religious norms to be problematic, you know, like even you can have like a virulently homophobic, radical Islamic-led country or paramilitary organization like Hezbollah, and you're willing to set aside civil rights abuses towards women, civil rights abuses towards queer people, civil rights abuses towards dissidents, people who oppose the powers in those regions. You're willing to set all that aside because they are taking a stance against the Israeli state. And so you just kind of end up there. Like, I don't literally think that Hasan is anti-Semitic. Much as left-wing, just not Hasan levels. Yeah, I'm firmly left-wing. Hasan has done a pretty good job of, I would say, hiding his power level. Like, I'm not sure to what extent his sort of high clout streaming friends are aware of his actual political stances. Hasan literally believes in a violent revolution if need be that would usher in a socialist government, socialist economic structure. For example, when he was having a conversation with Ethan from H3H3, his position was that in his ideal state, content creators would get government subsidies to do content creation. Yeah, think about that for a minute. He wants people like me to receive government subsidies. He wants the government to, like, his ideal government would be paying me to do content creation. But he's a legit Marxist-Leninist. He's all for like violent revolution, and he's very, very, very anti-capitalist, or at least that's what he says he is. If you can't find the irony in selling, $45 sweatshirts with the words "capitalism must end" on it, if you can't understand that irony, then I feel like you're a little too far gone. The Democratic Party has to fight a war on two fronts, and I feel like they've just been kind of ignoring the information war that's going on out there. I feel like the Democratic Party leadership, the people that are in charge of the decision-making processes at the highest levels, they have these naive notions that the truth will prevail. If they just go on MSNBC enough, if they just go on CNN enough, if they just go on ABC enough, if they do 60 Minutes interviews and blah, 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 and they do press briefings and give interviews to the New York Times, that people will just learn the truth that way. And they don't understand. I just don't think they understand the level at which people rely on alternative media these days. And they don't, in my opinion, they don't aggressively go after the lies, the constant lies, the insane lies that happen. You should have 10 to 20 surrogates going out there into alternative media spaces and tackling these lies as they pop up. You know what I mean? It's not enough to do just like funny political ads making fun of Trump for talking about killing cats and dogs. You need to go out there and actually engage with these people and find a way to do it. Find a way to do it in a way that doesn't turn people off, make you come across as elitist or snobby. It's a razor's edge. You have to walk this razor's edge. But so far, the Democratic Party is just not. I don't think they've adapted to the times yet. And it's deeply worrying, because if they keep making this mistake, we're just going to keep losing elections.